We have with us on the line Dr. Gabrielle Hosein of the Institute of Gender and Development at the University of the West Indies. I'd like to say good morning, Dr. Hosein.
Good morning to your viewers also.
How are you this morning?
Well, we have a week of activities ahead, so gearing up for that.
Yes, and today you start with gender justice.
Yes, so this morning there's a forum. It starts at 9 at UWI at the School of Education, and it's on the concept, the idea, the vision of gender justice. And we're dealing with 4 kinds of justice: ecological justice, economic justice, sexual justice, and of course peace and justice. And this is to kind of give people a sense of, you know, how these visions for our society intersect gender and women's rights. And we're bringing activists, we're engaging in supporting rural women's empowerment, programs, LGBTI rights, and so on, to come and speak, so that those who come to the forum also know that people from Trinidad and Tobago are actively doing different kinds of justice to overall create what we call a world of not just women's rights, but gender justice overall.
But some may argue that there are more important issues to focus on. Why now and why this?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, I'm never sure what the more important issues are. For me, some of the most important issues have to do with the current economic crisis and the impact that economic insecurity is having on people's everyday lives, their ability to pay school fees, passage, groceries, whatever else it is. And so that's why the question of economic justice is on our agenda, because we can't only talk about economic insecurity. We have to talk about how can we achieve a more equitable economy, you know, less corruption. Corruption takes directly from our children's school bags and mouths. It takes directly from the quality of health care available to the aged and the young. You know, it takes directly from the quality of daycare available for working mothers, whether in Kentucky Fried Chicken or in High Street San Fernando. And so for me, the economic questions are ones that are absolutely pivotal. They're also directly correlated with incidents of domestic violence. And as well, the ecological questions, you can't get more critical than that. For this generation, the ecology is the #1 issue. But of course, it intersects women and men and boys and girls' lives in different ways because of the different expectations, rights, power, and roles that we have. So that's why we're bringing activists who are working in their communities, because, you know, women's rights isn't different from any other issue out there. The rights of girls signals to us where our society still needs to go, and it also highlights the experiences of some of the most vulnerable. So for me, these are in fact important issues, and we can help show how they matter to those across the nation.
There's always been talk about the national gender policy. How do you see that playing a role in this situation?
Well, we definitely need a national gender policy, and the reason we need a national gender policy is because we can't tackle the question of gender equality or gender justice in health in one way, in agriculture another, in education in a completely different way, because these are all just branches of one state that's trying to develop the society and improve all of our lives and communities. So what a national gender policy does is look at the different sectors and ministries: health, agriculture, labor, you know, the environment, social development, and says, okay, if we have one goal, what are the different roles that these different agencies can play to help us getting there? And when you don't have a policy, you don't have one vision and one plan across the state. What you get are multiple and sometimes competing and even contradictory approaches. And that's why a national gender policy is important. And that's why we're still advocating for one, but one in which nobody's rights are left behind.
I know there was a plan back in 2009 to have gender equality by 2020. Have you heard anything about what happened with that policy?
You might be referring to the like Vision 2020, now Vision 2030, which is our national student development plan. And the development plan for the society is outlined in Vision 2030. It's a good one. It's aligned with what are now called the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals, anyone can just Google them, and that they're easy to understand. It's like clean water, end of corruption, good governance, gender equality, empowering education. So these are the goals, and the Sustainable Development Plan is aligned with them. But could we possibly achieve women's rights, and a world of true gender justice by 2020? Not at the rate of the efforts that we're currently making. We know that men are making, on average, about $15,000 more a month than women. We know that women are still predominantly working in non-unionized and low-paid work in shop clerks and in the retail sector, even if some are doing well. We know they have the Caribbean paradox of women doing better at university and getting more qualifications, but doing less well in the labor market. We know that girls' rates of HIV are higher. We know that teenage pregnancy, as girls experience it, exacerbates their vulnerabilities. We know we don't have a systematic program to deal with gender-based violence as a preventative approach in the society. We don't have a sexual and reproductive health policy that can guide how we deal with this issue. So there's a lot to accomplish, and we have to look beyond what seems to be individual women doing well. Individual women are doing well, and more power to them, because it's happening in a system that's set against the idea of women's power. But we have to look at those that are not doing well, girls and women that are managing care of elderly and children and economic insecurity, the ones that are in the court trying to get protection orders and going again and again and again and still living in fear. We have to look at those women, because we always have to focus our work on those that are still struggling for things that we may have achieved, or for rights that they just can't experience as a daily reality.
But over the years, do you think Trinidad and Tobago has made strides in recognizing the contributions of women in Trinidad and Tobago?
Absolutely. Trinidad and Tobago has made strides, and it's good for people to know that a country doesn't just make strides, just like history doesn't just happen. Things happen because people struggle, and they advocate, and they persist, and they protest. So when we think about historical change, we mustn't think about it as something that just kind of happens, become more progressive between one day and the next. We really have to, I think, account for the foot soldiers in the trenches that are advocating and meeting and creating policies and doing research and speaking out and working in the States as well as outside, social workers. So I just want to say that all progressive social change we see, there's somebody's sweat and tears behind it, and to really acknowledge the work it takes for there to be progressive social change, and to say, yes, Trinidad and Tobago has done well in a range of areas, and education would be the primary one. Where there's a meritocracy, women tend to do well. But there are a lot of areas. I would argue politics. The fact that women have never been more than 30% of the parliament is a crime. And had it happened that women were 70% of the parliament for all of Trinidad and Tobago's independent history, that would be seen as a sign of gender inequality, the same way we see a sign of boys entering university in lower numbers as a sign of gender inequality. So the fact is that the signs are all around us of us, yes, doing well, but needing to be better. And it's important that we don't just see progress for women, individual women who stand out alone. Progress for women is when masses of women are not living in insecure conditions, are not living in, are safe everywhere they are, where sexual abuse rates, which primarily affect girls, go down, so that our families become safe spaces for them. When we think about social change, we want to think not just about individuals who are exceptional. We want to think about ordinary women and the children that they're raising and the families that they're a part of, and the justice that they have access to.
Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, the Institute of Gender and Development at the University of the West Indies is having a week of activities, and today is the Gender Justice. Can you once again just give us the time and the venue of this event?
Absolutely. So at the School of Education at the University of the West Indies this morning, the Institute for Gender and Development Studies and Interclub is beginning a week of collaborative activities with a range of other organizations that are involved. So not just these two. It's at 9:30 at the School of Education, and the theme is gender justice, and you'll both be getting, like, you know, good conceptual definition, because that's what we can do, but also stakeholders from across the nation presenting their vision and their work, and the theme is gender justice. After this, all of your listeners can go on the Facebook page, International Women's Day Trinidad and Tobago, and you will see a calendar of all the activities that are going on for the week. You can also add your activity, and you can add, as a man or a woman, your solidarity message. We will be creating a campaign called Caribbean Men Can, and the Caribbean Men Can campaign, all the statements are up on that Facebook page, International Women's Day Trinidad and Tobago, and that's meant to give men a kind of inspiration and space and some ideas for the role that men can play in supporting women's rights, because, of course, women's rights is everyone's responsibility. So that's going to be rolling out too, and that's the way anyone can participate. And then on Saturday, the 10th, we are also organizing a march around the Savannah. I think about 600 or 800 people came last year, men and women, boys and girls. They made their signs. And the signs are important, the signs and T-shirts, because that's where you say to the public, these are the issues that we take seriously enough to say they still need to be addressed. And at the same time, you can do it in a safe space of hundreds of people who are also celebrating the efforts that have gotten us this far and kind of soberly commemorating a legacy of struggle that we hope to continue to inspire another generation to make efforts at, as long as any kind of injustice remains, that we have the power to change.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Gabrielle Hosein of the Institute of Gender and Development at the University of the West Indies.